and I've not read it, so I've got to be careful what I say, allegedly accused LBJ of having JFK murdered. Now, that's all very strong language. The press secretary, I believe, has either not said anything about it or left the impression that he doesn't, he's not in on this, or I don't know. His brother has also been nominated to head up the Medicare operation. Did you read about that? And that's, I know you refer to the Kennedy conspiracies in the book, and what does that do to a story? What does it do to the people that believe all the conspiracies about JFK?
Well, I know of the book only through the news accounts.
Now, I had the father of the White House press secretary on my show for an hour and a half months ago. He was LBJ's personal head lawyer. He was there when LBJ said, I had Kennedy killed. He writes a book about it full of documents. And then that's their response to it. Their response is well, doesn't really say anything. 92% of the people in America believe the government killed Kennedy in major polls. You little 8% can keep saying we're all crazy. We know the facts. To the next clip, please.
Good morning.
Yes, good morning, gentlemen. Yes, my conspiracy theory is that the Democratic Party is behind the New World Order. If you think about it, in order to have the New World Order, you have to have a weak America. You look at the Democrats, they're constantly trying to cut defense, cut intelligence, trying to bring us in line with, like, the European Union. Everything about them is, it's like they basically want us to become a state of the European Union. And you see Bush is like, we don't need their permission. And you see all the Democrats like, oh, we need the internationalists. We need
Caller, but let me ask you this, though. George Herbert Walker Bush was, I think, one of the first people to ever talk about the New World Order, and he's a Republican.
So you see the whole New World Order right there for you. This guy calls in, I believe the Democrats are the New World Order. They're fighting our Lord Bush. They're really trying, the EU's taking over. Bush is signing on, expanding UNESCO, going along with the UN, while on the surface acting like he's fighting with them. And the caller thinks Bush is fighting the New World Order. Michael Savage, fake neocon, says that. Whereas in reality, it's all part of the false left-right paradigm that we're all being sold. And it is the Bushes calling for the New World Order, and this guy's saying that the Republicans are fighting it. I mean, that's the emotional garbage we're talking about. It's very frustrating. Go back to it, please.
And there's nothing more to it than that. What's your opinion on that?
Well, I don't know what goes on in Skull and Bones. The thing about any organization that has restricted visibility, that makes claims to secrecy, is that it's possible to project onto it anything that someone on the outside wishes to, whether it's Skull and Bones or...
So he says he doesn't know anything about Skull and Bones, but we're projecting onto it. We've got video of them throat-slitting, worshiping Satan, and they say it's a mock sacrifice. But we're weird. I snuck into Bohemian Grove and got footage of the Moloch worship, the Canaanite human sacrifice god. It's admitted. But I'm projecting onto it. He says he doesn't know anything about it, but then he tells us, the public, that we're wrong and projecting something onto it. One of the callers of the show says, well, what about Carroll Quigley, the big professor at Georgetown, who was Bill Clinton's mentor, who Bill Clinton, by the way, thanked in his first State of the Union address? What about Carroll Quigley? He wrote the, Anglo-American Connection. It was the Anglo-American establishment. And then he also wrote Tragedy and Hope. And Quigley says, I'm New World Order. I've been in the secret documents. I believe in world government. Here's the plan. I don't agree with the establishment saying this should be secret. And Tragedy and Hope's like 900 pages long, laying out all his meetings with the globalist. That's never been refuted. But the globalists are on TV calling for world government. And, of course, the professor just rolls his eyes and, none of it's true, basically. It's incredible. Then a caller calls in and says, Alex Jones, he just does his research. He lives this. You should be researching it. You shouldn't be so ignorant about the facts and then pontificate about what you believe about it. And she talks about how I work tirelessly and how I research this. And I was up late at night grabbing these clips for this live show, and I thought to myself, you know, I appreciate people saying that, because I was up at 2 o'clock. I was up at 2 o'clock in the morning grabbing these clips to play them here live and comment on them.
You're next. Thanks for waiting.
Thank you, Brian, for your good work. This is the Prairie Populist. I'd like to have the professor talk about 2 books by Professor Quigley, who taught at Georgetown, taught Bill Clinton, as a matter of fact. His first was, I think, called The Anglo-American Connection, and it's very revealing, tracing New York people, I suppose, in the upper echelons, back to English connections and ultimately Cecil Rhodes starting the Rhodes system. The other I can't is his magisterial history of the United States, in which he admits being privy to this group. He doesn't identify them, saying that they do exist, and he actually is somewhat sympathetic to their views. Now, you know, I can't remember the name of that, but maybe if you'd mention that and the Anglo-American Connection, people could really read up something professional on this. And remember, Freud said there are no accidents.
Thanks.
Well, there is what might be termed at least a semi-scholarly conspiracy literature. In other words, a conspiracy literature that does pay some attention to the normal canons of proof. On the other hand, the response to it, whether in the form of responses to Carol Quigley or others who write in that genre, has still been a good deal of skepticism.
Good morning. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Brian. Hi, Mr. Barkin, or Dr.
Hi.
Barkin. I've just 2 things I'd like to bring up for you to think over. It seems to me, Mr. Barkin, that it's your job to know about, you know, as much as you can possibly know about Skull and Bones and other, you know, secret societies. If you set yourself up as an expert, I would think that you would, you know, Alex Jones is an expert because he lives every moment of his life is exposing these, you know, people. And
Do you believe him, by the way, Hamilton?
well, it just resonates. It rings true. But please let me just make this other point. Just because it's a conspiracy theory doesn't mean that it isn't valid. Now look at what 40 years how much information 40 years has brought out about the JFK assassination that was considered a balderdash, you know, in the beginning. It's human nature to look at things, especially if you are extremely intellectual, like Mr. Barkin. Brian, for example, if you could bring somebody on that isn't so left-brained, you know, who is almost just closed-minded completely because of their intellect. Their intellect is so strong that they cannot see that there's truth to this. It might not be completely true, not every detail, but the general idea.
Carl, let me give you an example. This morning I was listening to Alex Jones on this show, Coast to Coast AM. He's talking about
I heard the show too.
He's talking about Bohemian Grove and the importance of all these people meeting. And then he makes a statement that President Bush, when he wasn't president, sealed the deal with Dick Cheney there at the Bohemian Grove to be his vice presidential candidate. And when I was listening, I said to myself, Vice President Cheney was the head of his committee to find a vice president. Why did they need to go to Bohemian Grove to settle this deal?
Okay, Brian, but look at all of the things that we have found out about
like
Dick Cheney as being you know, the CEO of Halliburton and things like that.
Well, we knew that before the election.
I mean, that's dishonest. It's not.
What's dishonest?
It's not up front. Cheney is a very secretive man. You don't know.
But you mentioned Halliburton.
He hides himself.
You mentioned Halliburton. What's secret about that? We knew he had headed Halliburton before the
but
election.
It's a conflict of interest. Nobody will say the word. It is a conflict of interest for him to be in the oil business and be a multi-gazillionaire.
All right, thanks.
And we're not going to stop. We're covering the facts. We're covering the truth. We're exposing it. And a lot of people are catching on and waking up. And I like a lot of the stuff that Brian Lamb does. I think he's better than a lot of the mainstream media. I've been a supporter of C-SPAN. But he continually talks about me, continually snipes at me for years with other guests that I've never even exposed here on the air. I've never even responded to it. I've tried to get the professor on the radio. I've tried to get Lamb on the radio to talk to him about all this. I've tried to say, hey, have me on your show if you talk about me all the time, and it hasn't happened. So I had to come on here and expose their hit piece. Thanks for joining us. God bless.